What films that appear really innocent on the surface are actually ducked up? The Parent Trap. What kind of ducked up divorce settlement was that? We're breaking up? I guess we'll just each take a twin and never tell them about each other. Great parenting. Folks. It does sound like something that would have happened in the 1800s. Though. It happened to my grandfather, not a twin. But a brother close to him in age, and that was about 1915. In Ghostbusters. Peter Venkman shows up to a date with a powerful sedative. I always thought there was a huge missed opportunity in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe to address the fact that these ducking kids live their lives, like 25 years, in Narnia at the end of the first book. They lived as royalty. In absolute opulence. Wanting for nothing. And then after they'd lived their youth and approach their middle age, they accidentally find themselves being unceremoniously dumped back into the goddamn wardrobe. Back in England. In a home where they're unloved and unwanted again. That kind of shit should duck these kids up. But nope. It's time to go learn all about Prince Caspian. Whoever the shit he is. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The villain literally sings an entire song about how he is consumed with lust and wants to grape a girl. What the duck? Disney? It's a book. And is a lot more disturbing. Frollo tells Esmeralda that she can live if she will be his sixth slave forever. Then he burns her at the stake for telling him no. Cars 2. The villains in that movie are lemon cars. On the surface, using black and white kid logic, they are bad because they want to kill Lightning McQueen and the other race cars. But at some point in the movie, their motivations are revealed. They have been made fun of and marginalized in society for their whole lives. Manufacturers have stopped or started to wind down making spare replacement parts for them. But since they are cars, they need those parts to live. Essentially. The villains are trying to carry out a scheme to get rich so they can afford to live and finally be somewhat accepted in society. Planned or forced obsolescence in the Cars universe is essentially equivalent to genocide of the perceived lower class. Bambi is the story of growing up sheltered and protected. And then being slapped in the face by real life. And when you are down and broken because you've never experienced any sort of hardship, someone walks by, in this case your dad, and says suck it up buttercup. It's like this till you die. And well, then there's another half a movie. But that first half has always ducked me up. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's just so for kids. A reclusive man who's been screwed over lures people into his maze. And puts them in traps that kill them in an ironic fashion based on their character flaws. And when you are in the trap, you get taunts advice from a small creepy thing with a painted face. The one who survives the trap and who passes the final test gets saved from their old life and then becomes the madman's apprentice. Snow White. She dies and the midgets embalm and keep her in a trophy case until a necrophiliac comes around to have sex with her. In the original tale of Sleeping Beauty, the prince grapes Sleeping Beauty while she's in her endless sleep. She becomes pregnant and gives birth while still asleep. She only wakes up when the baby mistakes her finger for a nipple and sucks out the thorn that put her under the curse. Stuart Little. Can you imagine being a human child in an orphanage and this nice family comes to adopt someone? You think it's your lucky day and bam. They pick a ducking mouse instead of a kid. Imagine being the kid though. He had every right to be resentful towards Stuart. His parents had likely told him for months he was going to get a little brother. And he was so excited he set up his room and everything only to end up with a ducking mouse. Not a film. But Avatar, The Last Airbender. Surface, a bunch of kids having fun and going on an adventure. Deeper level, the sole survivor of mass genocide tries to end a war. If it wasn't a kid's cartoon, it would be bloody as duck. Monsters Incorporated. Interdimensional entities scaring the shit out of children to harness their fear as energy is pretty ducked up. A little too close to home. Not to mention Randall and Mr. Wharton's plan on kidnapping children and forcibly extracting their scream energy. Which would presumably heal them or worse, they'd live in constant agony. I always found that plan so much more sinister than a lot of people did when I really thought about it. The kids would have to be kept in a state of perpetual terror and anguish to generate enough power. And what happens when they are adults? They wouldn't just toss them back into the human world, they'd dispose of them and simply kidnap more. Really eerie to think about. It's just one scene. But an elf buddy leaves behind a note for his family saying that he doesn't belong anywhere and then walks alone to the edge of a bridge. He gets interrupted by Santa's sled before we see what he was gonna do once he got there. The Bee Movie appears as a kid movie and it's literally about a bee and a ducking human liking each other. It also has very weird jokes. The scene where they are picking jobs is pretty dark. A bee dies every 2 seconds to open up a new job and they're just watching the board like vultures waiting to swoop in. Monster House. At first it's just a quirky movie about an actual haunted house. Then spoiler. The house turns out to be the spirit of the old man's wife who was buried alive under concrete in the basement. That movie is messed up, man. The Incredibles. If you look at it, at the beginning of the movie the family is insanely dysfunctional. And Helen thinks Bob is running around with another woman. Didn't notice this till I watched it a few weeks ago. Edit, a word. To me, it's that there's a ducking insane amount of death. Unlike 99% of Pixar and Disney where the threat of death is not real. The Incredibles included a Sheetan man didn't really even imply it so much as show it. You know those bad guys in your TV shows? Well, these people aren't like those characters. They won't hesitate because you're children. They will kill you if they get the chance. Pretty shocking to hear that in a Pixar film. Finding Nemo. If they weren't fish. Think about how ducked up a movie that would be. It's basically Taken, but with clone fish. Disney Descendants. If you think about it. All of the Disney good guys banged all of the bad guys to the aisle. And blocked by magic from coming to the good side. But the ducked up part is that these villains have children. Children that have nothing to do with the crimes their parents committed. But the children are now condemned to a life of poverty. Lying. Stealing. Cheating. etc. Because of something they had no part in. 50 First Dates. She never gets her memory back and has to wake up in an unfamiliar bed and learn that she can't remember any past memories of her kids, presumably forever. Dumbo. The part where Dumbo's mom rocks him through the bars of her jail cell while singing about how much she loves him is ducking devastating. Inside Out. I did not expect that film to get so real. Someone was chopping onions for a significant portion of the time I spent watching it. I think they did a decent job at representing an emotional shutdown during a major life change. Jumanji. Kid gets sucked into a dangerous forest alone and is hunted for years. The timeline resets, but it's implied all 4 players remember the previous timeline so that the kids growing up have memories of dying and stuff. The Little Mermaid. 1. Ariel is underage. 2. It says that it's okay to run away from your family if you really love that guy you've never met. 3. Physical appearance is all that matters. Guys don't really care about having a conversation. 4. If you collect enough stuff in your cave, you'll eventually be happy. Finding Dory. Maybe ducked up is the wrong turn of phrase, but that movie is all about the experience of having a mentally handicapped family member. Right in the feels. The Hunger Games. You think it's innocent when you hear the plot, but then they reveal the main character uses a bow and arrow instead of a trebuchet. How can she not prefer the more superior siege weapon? Granted, the Hunger Games is not exactly what one would call a siege situation. But the usefulness of a weapon capable of launching a 90-kilogram projectile over a 300-meter distance is indisputable. How Katniss ended up winning without the usage of a trebuchet is above and beyond me. The only logical reason I can think of is that the book is fiction. Star Wars. Imagine how many people died when the Death Star exploded. Superstar Destroyer crashed. Probably like 500,000 lives lost. Sanitized violence is crazy. Life of Pi. I'm surprised no one else has mentioned this film. The twist at the end makes the whole thing so dark. It disturbs me to this day. The Golden Compass. Holy gonads. Super. It goes from a movie about kids and adults with familiars to I'm putting these kids, mostly gypsies, in camps and exterminating their familiars. Killing a part of them. That messed me up, man. Still does. Grease. I saw it the first time when I was 12 and was like, wait a minute, did she just throw all her values, morals and self-identity out the window for this asshole? Spy Kids. Those thumb men. Watched on a flight recently and it's way more disturbing than I remember. Rudolph. Here are just a few examples. Everyone, including Santa, makes fun of Rudolph for being different, run him out of town, and only accept him when they need to use his deformity for their own gain. Hermie is run out of town for having aspirations beyond being an assembly line worker. Santa is kind of a big dig to his wife and subordinates. At the end, the bird who can't fly is thrown from the sleigh without a parachute. That bird is dead now. I feel that it is the fault of autocorrect, but I can't prove a thing. Also, I knew I was forgetting a few things, including sexism and what they did to that poor Bumble. But I never claimed that this was a comprehensive list. In Frozen, the trolls were supposed to be love experts. For some reason they really wanted Anna and Kristoff to be together. But when they learned that Anna is already engaged, instead of letting it go, they tried to get Anna to get rid of the fiancé. Then they tried to blindside Anna and Kristoff and get them to marry each other, despite the fact that the two of them were telling them to stop and listen. Now imagine this being done in real life by your parents. Well, I guess that's just trolls being trolls. Titanic. Hear me out. Rose survives, has a full life with children and grandchildren and other experiences and loves, dies in her extreme old age surrounded by photos of her life, and goes to the afterlife to be with her husband. Just kidding. She returns to the traumatic Titanic to be with her one-night teenage stand. This is a good point. Maybe her idea of heaven is getting to live out the life she missed out on. The one with Jack. Back to the Future and the character Biff. I'm assuming they were going for comic relief with the lunkhead jock. But Biff was constantly physically harassing women on the street and tried to grape the main character's mother when she was a teenager. Does anyone else think that Biff actually did grape her at the dance in the original timeline? Lorraine seems self-loathing medicating and the dad seems fearful of Biff, and he knows that timid walkover George McFly isn't going to speak up.